Good morning, Christ Covenant family. It is good to be with you today. As your missions pastor, I'm so excited about this week in the life of our church. This coming Sunday begins our annual missions conference, and I am grateful to the leadership of Christ Covenant, particularly Blair Smith, to give us this normal Sunday school time to give you a glimpse into the lives of our missionaries and church planters that we partner with around the world. This year's conference is Spreading the Flame in Latin America, and we are going to be welcoming to our pulpit this Sunday Dr. Miguel Nunez. He and his wife Kathy are traveling from the Dominican Republic, where he serves as the senior pastor of Iglesia Bautista Internacional Church. Miguel contributes regularly to the Gospel Coalition and is influenced in shaping the vision of ministry in Latin America. On top of all of his ministerial duties, his speaking and writing, he and Kathy serve as physicians, most recently helping their own country deal with the current pandemic. You will not want to miss him as he challenges us in God's Word to consider what God has done and continues to do in the lives of people in Latin America. Next Sunday, the following, March 14th, our own Jose Portillo will be taking this time of Sunday school to teach and to explain the vision around our newest church plant, Vive Charlotte. Jose will conclude preaching that evening service in our church. And in the morning, you'll have the opportunity to hear from John Saunders. John is a pastor in Detroit, Michigan, planting Redeemer Presbyterian there. And Kevin had given us his work, and we're excited to have him with us to kind of talk about what is it like to plant an urban church these days. And Detroit is definitely an urban center. So I want to take this opportunity to invite you to all of our worship services to be inspired and informed and involved in the great work of the gospel. So normally today, we would be all gathered together in the Community Life Center, which is a time I love, hosting 3 or 4 missionaries. And since COVID has prevented much of the international travel, we thought the next best thing would be to bring them to us via the internet. So this morning in our regular time of Sunday school, we wanted you to hear from 3 of our supported workers. I have recorded an interview with each of them as you can better understand their unique, or so that you can better understand their unique calling and the role they play in the advancement of the gospel around the world. I hope you continue to watch and that you, in hearing them, would be greatly encouraged by the work God has called them to do as an extension of Christ's covenant. So first up will be Miss Cynthia Rubel, serving with Life Hope Network in Nagoya, Japan. It's a city in Japan of about 2.5 million people. And I particularly want you to note and hear her answer to my question of what has kept her in the field or on the field for the last 20 years. I think you'll be very encouraged by that answer. After Cynthia, I interviewed Wesley Marshall, one of our newer church planters serving in Cape Town, South Africa. Wesley and his wife Nicole, with their 2 young children, are planting in the eastern part of the city of Cape Town. Take note of Wesley's description of a partnership he has with another sending church in Cape Town, Hope City. We supported at Christ Covenant Stephen Murray when he planted Hope City several years ago. So multiplication of churches is happening, and we're excited to be a small part of what perhaps may become a new Presbyterian denomination in South Africa. Lastly, you'll hear from Rich and Susan Bay, Christ Covenant members who have been called to Japan to serve in a church in the city of Tokyo. I'd like for you to especially listen to their answer about what it takes to be sent as a missionary family. Let me ask you to be patient with the pauses in the interviews. These were recorded some halfway around the world. And so may the Lord use this conference for His purposes to encourage us toward involvement in prayer, in giving, in sending, and in going for the sake of His name to all the nations. Thank you.
Hello, Christ Covenant. Thank you so much for years of faithful financial and prayer support. I know you really pray specifically and diligently for us, and we're so thankful and thankful for this opportunity. Can I introduce Mike, a former homestay who's helping me at the cafe right now because I'm at the cafe while she's here?
Absolutely.
Okay. Eddie.
Hello.
This is Eddie.
Hello.
She's a wonderful help and a godsend for me, and she was my homestay last year. She's a single mother of a beautiful 11-month-old. Okay. I know. So we're just so thankful for her. Thank you. She's here working around. So
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Tell her thank you. Glad to meet her.
I did.
So tell me a little bit about life in Japan these days. What's it like with the pandemic?
Oh, wow. Okay. I would say, the pandemic here has not been nearly as bad as in America to begin with. So it's a very different situation. And we have really stayed open and kept the cafe open, the church open. And for one reason, just so that we're not more concerned than the people around us. But I guess it has perhaps sparked a little bit more spiritual interest, I hope. I would say, do you want me to talk a little bit about Japan in general, what life is like here?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. I'd say, we're in an inner city neighborhood, but it's like a small neighborhood. And I would say in Japan, life is quite peaceful and quiet and a kind of simple lifestyle, not very luxurious. People mostly walking and riding bikes. All our cafe customers come by walking or bike, and so we're kind of close together. It has a very strong culture. So not 20 feet from me outside is an idol that many people stop and worship. So idol worship and ancestor worship is very alive and well here. And so it's a hard soil, kind of like Athens during Paul's day. It's a very, in a way, even though they value humility, it's a very proud culture and a very ordered and well-run life and country. So they're not looking for someone to come and tell them how to do things better. So we have to that's why it can be really hard to be here. But one thing they value, I would say the thing or characteristic they value the most is not giving up and endurance. Even if you have to come crawling, if you can make it to your job, they really value that kind of thing. So sometimes I feel like I'm just starting my ministry here now, the real ministry, because since I've been here for 20 years and Life Hope is now 16, the church and cafe are about 6 years old. People are like, oh, you're really serious. And we're getting a lot more opportunities to really bear good witness for Christ with government people, hospital people, media, and neighbors. And so I thank God for keeping us here and keeping us going.
That's great, Cynthia. So you're in Nagoya, correct?
Yes.
How big is Nagoya?
It's about like Atlanta, I would say.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you go back because you were in Atlanta at one time. How did you know that God was calling you to ministry like this? You told me one time that you were headed to, you did work in advertising in Atlanta. So how did this happen? What was the process? Well,
I was a rebellious person until I was 35 when I finally surrendered my life to Christ. And it took a lot of hard things. And I was in Atlanta and advertising for many years, and God really had to get a hold of me. Of course, I had a wonderful Christian family behind me, and have a Christian background. But when I got saved, I really got saved, and I was really not interested in what I had been doing thus far. And so I went to seminary, RTS Charlotte, with that in mind, to probably be a missionary. And during my first and second years, came to Japan for a small, a 2-month internship, and did not want to come back to Japan because I thought the language was too hard for my age. I would be 38 when I finally got here. And so I was hoping for something more in Latin America or South America, but God called me just so very clearly and made it very plain and changed my heart and desire. So I can look back on that and just gain a lot of strength from that when days are hard. I don't know why I'm crying. There's no reason. I just thank God for that clear call.
That's great.
Okay.
That's great. You're involved in a lot of ministries of different kinds, church, homestays, all kinds of things going on. Tell us a little bit about each of those. Just give us kind of a summary.
Okay. Well, Life Hope is like a crisis pregnancy center, and our main thrust has been the homestays, or the pregnant women living with us, because we really wanted to be involved with helping change lives and bearing witness for Christ, and something that was really countercultural. And so that's kind of the mainstay. And I have 2 homestays now, a 17-year-old and a woman in her 20s. And I sent out a prayer request, but especially the woman in her 20s has given birth to a child early with a lot of medical problems, and we're really trying so hard to make adoption happen in that case, because instead of putting him in an orphanage until he's 18, and I got a message that the homestay, she had left Friday, but she's coming back tomorrow to the house. So this is probably going to be an ongoing saga, so please continue to pray for her. Of course, we do a lot of post-abortion counseling, which is also unique here. Very a gospel-centered study that we do. There we have the cafe ministry that we've had going for about 6 years, and reach out to the neighborhood and give the some homestays a job. And we have a young man who came into the cafe 2 years ago, who's now in baptism preparation with our pastor, who's the MTW team leader, a little bit far away, but he comes to preach here. And it's just been the cafe's been wonderful. It's been very hard to keep it going since Anna, my adopted daughter, had to go back to the Philippines with her child, but we're hoping she will return maybe late this year as a short-term missionary, Lord willing. And Micah, my son that I adopted, he's going to be 14, goes to the neighborhood schools, and we just love our neighbors, and are really blessed to be here in this neighborhood. The church has really benefited from Corona, because Zoom has really added people who could join us. And so actually, and because we could keep going, the church has really been growing. So we're so thankful for that.
Cynthia, you've been there 20 years.
20 years.
Help us to understand perhaps how you've stayed the course that long.
Okay. I mean, basically, like I said, God called me clearly to Japan, and he has not called me back to America. And I want to be in God's will. I'm more afraid that if he calls me back to America that I won't go. That's something I have to think about. But I appreciate that. And I would say another thing is the joy of the Lord. Um, yes, it's hard here and there's a lot of difficulties, but somehow God has given me a joy that is very sustaining. Um, the joy of the Lord is my strength. And I say that all the time. Micah has been a big part of that. And then I would say God's faithfulness to give us fruit along the way so that we don't get too discouraged has also been a big factor. Keeping an eternal perspective for ourselves and the women and people that we talk to. This life is not all there is. We don't have to get everything just the way we want it now. And we have a glorious future awaiting us in heaven with Jesus, and we can sacrifice now and wait for those things. And I would say also from the beginning, I knew that Japan valued longevity. And so I always had that goal in mind to make it to 20 years at least, because I knew that would open doors. And I can remember the early days of ministry, I just characterized as keeping my head down and working hard because no one was impressed with me. And unless you have a track record and continue with something, no one here is going to be impressed. And so I always wanted to make it at least 20 years. And I hope, Lord willing, many more.
That's great, Cynthia. We will pray for that. And how can we, you mentioned a prayer request earlier, so maybe the last thing I'd ask you is what can we pray for you about and for the church, for other things that are going on?
Well, I don't want to get into this too much, but it's a really changing world here for pro-life work. There's a big push by the government to, they're going to be the biggest player in crisis pregnancy counseling. And we've been able to do some training for them. And we were just asked yesterday to do some more. And our role is probably going to shift. And we really want to focus on homestays and working in partnership with all these groups. We want to be the group that really builds long-term relationships with these women and makes a difference in their lives. And of course, the post-abortion is a big prayer request. Yeah, that God would just continue to use us for his glory, and that we would not give up and we not grow weary of doing good. And the church is just really beginning to take off, that would continue. We have a young man in baptism preparation, that nothing would hinder him. That Anna and little Cynthia could get back to Japan if it's God's will. Certainly God has just really turned this hard experience into something wonderful in her life. So I know I can trust him. But
All right. Well, we will be praying for that. Christ Covenant really prays for our missionaries.
I know.
And so we're delighted to partner with you and are very thankful for you and thankful for this opportunity we had to do a little interview and see the work that you're doing. So thank you, Cynthia. I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll talk for a second.
Thank you, Mike and Christ Covenant, very much. God bless you.
Hey, Wesley, it's good to see you today. Welcome to Christ Covenant virtually on this, what will be a Sunday morning as you and I speak on a afternoon on Thursday. And I guess for you, it's in the evening. So we are delighted to have you at our missions conference virtually. Glad you could join us and answer some questions. And we're excited to partner with you. Why don't you start by introducing yourself? Not everybody in our church will know you, but tell us a little bit about yourself, about your wife, Nicole, kids, where you came from. Take a few minutes to do that.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, friends at Christ Covenant Church. It's so exciting to be able to speak to you guys this morning. Yeah, my name is Wesley. I am from Cape Town, South Africa. My wife is Nicole Marshall. She is an educator. The two of us have been married for about 8 years now, and we have two boys. Jackson turns 3 in April, and Joel was born in November last year. So they are keeping us quite busy. And at the same time, we are trying to take care of one of our other babies, and that is our church plant that God has called us to. Yeah, but we like I said, we are in Cape Town, South Africa, in a part of Cape Town called Woodstock. Yeah, and we feel that God has called us to Cape Town. We both of us were born and raised in Cape Town, and we feel that God has called us to love and serve the people in this specific part of Cape Town.
Fantastic, Wesley. So our folks will know this, but we, a number of years ago, supported a church in Cape Town called Hope City, and Stephen Murray is the pastor there, and his wife Rob, and they've been laboring there a number of years. And we are excited to know that you're connected to them. So what does that connection look like? How did that kind of end up in you going to plant this church, assuming you went out of that church? How'd that all look, and how's that going?
Mark, I think it was about almost 4 years ago, my wife and I felt that God was calling us to plant a church. At the time, the church that we were a part of, they weren't focused on church planting as we felt that a church could have been. And so we were out and we were looking for a church family and a church eldership that is quite keen and excited and focused on wanting to see churches planted throughout Cape Town, throughout South Africa, and to the ends of the earth. And we came across Stephen Murray through a friend of ours who is an American missionary who was serving in Cape Town. And he introduced us to Stephen. And when we started speaking to Stephen, it's like church planting was oozing out of his blood, and that was very, very exciting for us to know that there was a church in Cape Town that not only thought that church planting was a good idea, but they had a little bit of a plan and a strategy for seeing churches planted throughout Cape Town. And so we started attending Hope City Presbyterian Church. We came into a church family that was very, very different from the context that we grew up in and from the church that we grew up in. And the love and the support that we were shown as we came into this family it really blew our minds. And they really poured into us. They helped us get resources, help us get training when it comes to helping us get equipped for planting this church. And so when we initially got to Hope City, our idea was to plant an independent church. We didn't think that we were going to be planting a Presbyterian church or a Hope City Presbyterian church. And as we got involved in the community at Hope City, the community really became family. And when Nicole and I were speaking, we said that when we get sent out to go and plant a church, we want to look like our family. And one of the things that we said is we wanted to be a church who was called Hope City, and we wanted to be a Presbyterian church. And so we are very, very grateful for Stephen and Robin and the elders and leaders at Hope City Presbyterian Church. They've really helped us tremendously in terms of finances, relationship, prayer. It's been an amazing journey over the past 4 years, walking with them, leading up to this point where we are now on the verge of launching this new church here in the East City of Cape Town.
Fantastic. That's great. Wesley, what is the area of Woodstock like? Is it, just tell us, kind of explain, if you were driving one of us through Woodstock in Cape Town, what would you see? What would it feel like?
Yeah. So Stephen Murray and the Hope City Bowl congregation, they are in what you guys would probably call the downtown area of Cape Town. We'll call it the central business district of Cape Town. I mean, that is where they are located. So Woodstock, so our focus area is what we call the East City, and that is Woodstock, Salt River, and Observatory. And the East City is it's basically the east side of the downtown area of Cape Town. And so the East City, and this is Woodstock, Salt River, and Observatory, over recent years, and this is probably the past 5 to 8 or maybe 5 to 10 years, the East City has been changing very, very rapidly. It's been undergoing a very, very rapid process of gentrification. And that is simply because of its proximity to the downtown part of Cape Town. So a lot of young professionals are moving into the East City because of its proximity to the CBD or the downtown area where they are working. And accommodation is slightly cheaper in the East City as to what it is in the downtown area. And so as these young professionals are moving in, very, very sadly, a lot of the historic population is being displaced because of the whole gentrification process that's taking place. So I personally have mixed feelings about the whole gentrification process. I'm sad that people who have been living here for decades can now no longer afford to live here. But at the same time, there's opportunity as new apartment blocks are going in. That means new people are moving into the East City all the time. And that's opportunity for us to engage people with the good news of what God has done for us through his Son. So we've grown to love the East City. In fact, when I was a kid and you would tell me that we are going to Woodstock, I would be scared out of my mind. I would not dream of walking on the streets of Woodstock. Woodstock was well known for gangsterism. It was well known for prostitution and a lot of other social ills. Now, all of those social ills haven't disappeared completely. There is still a big drug problem. There is a big portion of the population that is experiencing homelessness. So there are still a lot of social ills, but for some reason they don't seem as eerie as they were when I was growing up as a kid.
That's fantastic. That's good. So I really have a better understanding of the part of the town or city that you're in. So perhaps having that kind of, you said you didn't want to go there years ago. Now you have really fallen in love with being in that part of the city and excited about planting a church. With all that growth, what are some unique challenges that you feel like the church is going to face, so that we might be able to pray for you along those challenges?
Yeah, one of the big challenges, and whenever people ask me about challenges, this is the first one that always comes to mind. It's a challenge that comes out of one of the things that we love the most about Woodstock, and that is that Woodstock in the East City is extremely diverse. So if you walk down the streets, you'll see white, colored, black, foreign African nationals, internationals, all living together. And that's one of the beautiful things about our neighborhood. But it also becomes one of the biggest challenges, especially as we see young professionals moving in, developing properties. And then we also see the historic colored community that has been living in the East City being displaced as a result of that. So there are very, very obvious tensions between this historic population and the gentrifiers who are moving into the neighborhood. So one of our dreams as a church plant is that we would see this diverse part of Cape Town gather as one to worship God in the context of a local church. And that is white, black, foreign African national, international, colored, Muslim, Hindu. We want all these people to be able to come together and worship God in the context of a church. And so with that said, the idea of gentrification and the tensions between the two, the people at the two ends of the pendulum are one of the big challenges for us here. Yeah. A second challenge that maybe I'd mention is that the East City has a big Islamic population as well. So a lot of the historical residents, the people that have been living here for decades, a lot of them are Muslim, and there is a very, very strong sense of community amongst the Muslim population. And our desire really is to love and serve this part of the East City with the good news of the gospel. But there are very, very obvious challenges that present itself with that. And so instead of us seeing converts coming in on a monthly basis from that specific segment of the population, we are very, very aware that it's probably going to be a longer game that we will have to play, if I can put it like that, before we see Muslims being discipled and coming into gospel community.
Wow. Yeah. Fantastic. That's great. So let me ask you maybe a final question. Take a few minutes to think about this, but we read here in the States about the pandemic and the effects of things going on in South Africa, even the variant that's come out of South Africa. What's the current situation for the church in South Africa, and what do you see on the horizon regarding the pandemic?
Yeah, there are several of my brothers who are in ministry. They are pastoring churches, and some of them have been doing it for the past decade, and others even more. And a lot of them have been challenged extremely by the effects of a lockdown as a result of the pandemic, especially now that we are allowed to start having worship gatherings again. A lot of the pastors are on seeing that their people are not returning to church. And very sadly, the reasons for them not returning is not because of the pandemic with the virus, it's because a lot of people have just gotten into very, very unhealthy rhythms where participating in anything the community is concerned. So a lot of my friends and a lot of pastors that I know have been very, very discouraged in some senses, coming out of like the very, very hard lockdown. At the same time, and I think our church plant is a testimony of this. We have seen God's incredible faithfulness to us during the hard lockdown last year. We were able to meet regularly and gather a group of people. We have about 20 people who are a part of our church plant now. And these are men and women whom have showed up week after week, even though when I say show up, it's not physically, our meetings have all been via Zoom. But we've seen people show up week after week to participate in some form of gospel community. And that has been incredibly encouraging for me at the same time.
Wesley, that's great. Thank you so much for the time. We are delighted to be able to support you, to pray for you, and to partner with the church. And so happy for you, and we'll continue to pray for you. Thank you for your time today, and may the Lord just continue to bless the work you're doing, and we will certainly be watching and praying.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, good morning, you guys. Good to see you all this morning. Rich
Good
and
morning.
Susan. We are glad to be able to interview you for our Sunday school time at Christ Covenant, and excited about our start of our missions week today. And so I think probably some people at Christ Covenant know you guys, but tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, a little bit about background, and excited to hear about what you're going to be doing.
Great. Well, thanks for having us, Mike. My name is Rich Bay, and this is Susan. We've been married for 20 years, and we have 3 kids. Maddie's our oldest. She's 14. Nathan, he's 13, and Solomon is 9. Some of you may have seen them around church. I'm originally from Michigan, so you have to know that I'm still partial to all my Detroit sports teams, including the Lions.
Yep.
And I come from a Catholic background and came to know Jesus during my sophomore year at Princeton University.
And I'm from Southern California originally, and was raised in a Buddhist home, and came to know Christ when I was 13 through a youth rally at a church. That was the first time I ever went to church in my life.
Wow. Very good. So it's been fun for me to get to know you guys over the past year. Rich, you and I have had several meetings from your work at SIM, and now a lot of things are rapidly changing. I'm curious, how long actually have you guys been at Christ Covenant?
Yeah, we've been here for a little over 2 years now, and we joined the membership very soon after we came.
Great, fantastic. Well, we're glad you're at Christ Covenant. As I got to know you, I realized quickly found out from you guys that both of y'all are physicians. So I'm curious, I think our folks at Christ Covenant would be curious too. How do you see your training as physicians, or vocationally that way, qualify you for the work perhaps you've done in the past, or qualify for you for this work you're going to be doing?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question, because when it comes to missions work, I think we often think all we have to do is just go somewhere and tell them about Jesus. And you don't necessarily have to be highly educated or trained. Anybody can do it. And you just have to be willing to go. And there's a portion to that is true. But we often get asked, does it feel like a waste to not use your medical education? I mean, you guys went through all that training and paid all that money, but our answer to that is no, we don't think it's a waste.
Yeah. We've learned that God doesn't waste anything. If we actually look at the Apostle Paul, he was a Hebrew of Hebrews, a Pharisee and a Greek. And all of those things put him in a very unique position to be able to teach in the synagogues, to be a missionary to the Gentiles, and to write many sections of the New Testament with the theological insights that he did. So for us, that means even our heritage is being used, our education is being used, our experiences are being used. We're both Korean Americans. We grew up in bilingual and bicultural homes. What that meant is that during our upbringing, we've had to delicately balance and learn to straddle the Korean culture and the American culture. It wasn't always easy, but we had to learn how to engage with people of different cultural sectors. But it also helped us to learn that language is not just about words, but that language itself is tied very intricately to culture and forms of thinking. And so we actually didn't recognize that as a huge blessing until we first went on the mission field. Now, you asked us how long we've been at Christ Covenant, and we've only been there for 2 years, but that's because prior to coming to Charlotte, we were actually overseas serving in missions. We were there for 10 years. And while we were there, we realized that being bicultural had actually helped us and equipped us to learn a language and to be a bridge builder between different cultures, and allowed us to have unique opportunities for ministry.
Yeah, and so, yes, we are both family physicians. That's where we met. We met in medical school. But also we are theologically trained. We've gone to seminary. And so what this opens up is avenues to be able to talk to people, not just about physical concerns, like in a clinic setting, but also to talk about spiritual concerns. And we've seen this, God use this in ways on the mission field to both Christians and non-Christians. And I think that one of the most important things is that having both a vocation and the calling gives us credibility. It gives us a platform and the ability to speak to people who are educated and to those people who have influence in those circles. So on one hand, we can talk to them like we do our peers. And then on the other hand, we get a platform as respected individuals that are on the same level as those people. And so, we really get access to that segment of society that I think is hard when you don't have a career or somewhere where you actually belong in that society.
And we saw this over and over again, not only on our short-term vision trip to Japan, but in our times of being in overseas, that people would listen to us once they find out that we were educated, that we were physicians. Because oftentimes they think, oh, well, I can see why, those nobodies want to become a Christian because they have nothing else. But when they realize, wow, these really highly educated, highly achieved people think it's worth being a Christian. Maybe there's something more to this. And so we actually found that people are more willing to listen when we are sharing our testimonies and the message that we come to share. Our theological training has become incredibly invaluable too, because in our times of being overseas, we found that those missionaries that didn't have the theological training, without unintentionally at times are preaching a cultural gospel rather than a accurate biblical gospel. And it's not a fault of their own, but it's because they've not had the opportunity to receive the greater theological training and the insights to be able to take people to a higher level in their teachings. And so it has become invaluable for us to be able to recognize and counter false teachings and to correct and to teach sound doctrine on the mission field.
And I will give you one short story. There was a medical student that we met on the field. And the first thing she asked us was, wait, you guys are doctors, so that means you're scientists. And wait, doesn't that conflict with believing in Jesus? And that kind of conversation comes up pretty frequently because they think having a good knowledge of science and whatnot is incompatible with faith, but actually it couldn't be further from the truth. And so that's another thing that we're able to do because of our background.
Great. So having met with you, I know where you're headed, and Susan, you just mentioned it. So you've been over in Southeast Asia before for 10 years. Now you're going to Japan. Why Japan? And perhaps on a personal level, what compelled you to go to think about Japan and go to Japan?
Yeah, actually, when we were serving in the restricted area in Asia before, we had a thriving ministry. We were doing well. And to our surprise, God told us that we were done and to pack up to go back home to the US. And when that happened, we knew we weren't done with missions, but we didn't know why God was telling us to return to the US. So when we returned in 2017, we continued to pray, asking God, Lord, what is it that you are asking us to do now? Right now we know we're supposed to be in the US, but why? And what does that mean? And how do you want us to be living? And it was clear that he didn't want us to go back to our vocation of being physicians. And so we didn't go back into medical practice. Instead, Rich took up a position with SIM as about one of the vice presidents within our mission agency. And during that time of waiting, we just continued to pray, asking for God's timing and his calling for us to be in another field, because we knew that he wasn't done with that work in us. And so as we started praying in the summer of 2019, actually rather abruptly, we began to learn about the statistics of Japan. It was rather sudden, and we weren't searching for it, but it kind of came searching for us. We learned that the Japanese people are the second largest unreached people group in the world. There's only one missionary for every 64,000 people. The average church size in Japan is 35, and that's a large church. And in Japan, most of the pastors, 70% of them are over the age of 50, which means that churches are dying out and there's no new generation of young pastors coming to take over. And so many churches are actually closing their doors. Not only that, because Japan is such a developed society, a lot of people don't really think about it as a mission field because they don't feel like they have much to offer. And then because it is so developed and it is so urbanized and the cost of living is so incredibly high, the challenge of support raising is overwhelming. So most missionaries don't even want to go there to want to consider it as a mission field, nor do mission agencies or churches want to send missionaries there because they think the cost of sending one missionary to Japan, I could send like 10 more out to somewhere else where it's cheaper and where they have greater need. But that's the very thing that intrigued us, that Japan had everything, but they didn't have the one thing that mattered, and that was Jesus Christ. And if that's what they need, that's where they need missionaries. It shouldn't be the overwhelming cost, the fact that it's developed, that we feel like we have nothing to offer to this developed society that should keep us from going there. As missionaries, we go there because they do not have Christ. And it's very clear that Japan does not have Christ.
And I would say after we kind of wrapped our heads around those statistics, we began to pray and we said, our whole family needs to be affirmed in this. It's not just a Rich and Susan thing, because, when we were in Asia prior, they were babies, they were infants, they just came along with us. But now we have teens, we have tweens, and they're just as much a part of this endeavor as we are. And so we wanted our kids to also feel called to Japan, not just saying, oh, mom and dad are making us go. So as soon as we started praying, the Lord started to answer that prayer. So everywhere we turned, Japan kept coming up, whether it was in conversations or meetings, social outings, family gatherings, just the topic would come up naturally. And we even saw it on some billboards. It was kind of interesting. And at that point, that's when we decided to go on a vision trip, because truthfully, none of us had been in Japan. And here we were talking about going. And that was when Christ Covenant supported us financially, prayed with us to go on our vision trip in November of 2019.
And specifically, the vision trip was with one purpose in mind, that is that God would confirm that calling upon our family, that we are to go to Japan to serve as missionaries. And we wanted that to be unanimous for all 5 of us. Then the secondary goal was, God, show us what you're doing in this country and what the needs are. And so during that time, we were actually able to go visit Cynthia and take her gifts from Christ Covenant Church and prayed with her. And she was moved to tears. She was saying, I don't think anyone from Christ Covenant Church has ever come and visited me. Sometimes when we're out here, we think like they forget about us because we don't communicate as much. And so for us to be present, to be learning about her ministry, and for to be able to pray with her and her needs there, it blessed her tremendously, and it was things like that the Lord was showing us over and over again. And it became very clear to all 5 of us that God was calling us. And it came in this way. For Rich and myself, we could see clearly God had placed this burden in our hearts. The needs were tremendous, and the connections we were making as we visited various cities and churches and missionaries, that God uniquely has positioned us to have a specific ministry here. Now, for our kids, it looked very different. Solomon was only 8 at that time, and so you wonder, like, well, how is he going to know God's calling him? Well, God is amazing in that he meets us where we are. And so in his 8-year-old mind, he used his 8-year-old logic, and he just said something simple like this. He goes, I really like it here in Japan. And why would God make it so that I would like it here, although I don't know anybody and I've never been here, if I'm not supposed to be here? And we said, that makes perfect sense. And if you feel like that's how God is speaking to you, great. Maddie, she had grown up the most in Asia, and she felt right at home. And as we were busy going around, she was so happy to be back in Asia. But she quickly noticed one thing. She said, there's people everywhere we go, and there's buildings. They have so much in Japan. It's such a developed place. But one thing is missing, Mom. I haven't seen a church yet. There's no church. And I said, that's right. And so she said, Mom, we need to come here because no one's here proclaiming Christ. Now, Nathan, our middle one, he's been the slowest to come around, and he really wasn't sure as we asked him, do you feel like God is calling you? And in the end, when we talked with him, we realized where he was having trouble. It wasn't so much that he didn't feel like God wasn't calling him. He actually was really struggling with the idea of leaving, because if God was calling him, that meant he had to leave Charlotte and Christ Covenant Church. And so he said, I like it here in Charlotte. I like it at Christ Covenant Church. I don't want to leave the youth group. I love going to Epic. But we said, yeah, we know those things. But that's not the question. The question is God calling our family to Japan? And he said, yes. God is calling our family to Japan. I just don't want to leave. And so we've been praying with him. And as we've been praying with him and talking to him, he's fully come around and he's recognized that God is calling our family. And so with this unanimous decision that we feel like God has confirmed in us, that this is what God has for our family.
That's great. That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that about your family. So, let me move on to a question. I'm curious about when you leave, and what does that look like for your family to leave right now? I know there's a lot of changes that are happening and transitions. So when do you leave, and what does that look like for you to go as a family?
Yeah, so we've set a launch date. I call it a faith date for the end of April. And that's coming up faster than we realize.
Yeah.
And one of the things that needs to happen is we have to be at 100% support before we can purchase our tickets to go. And one of the things we're praying for right now is what's called the certificate of eligibility. That needs to be issued for us to be able to get a visa to go in on a missionary visa to Japan. And because Japan's in a state of emergency through March, beginning of March, those offices are being minimally staffed in the consulate here in the US, And so we're just praying for our visas to be issued in a timely manner.
With that being said, we had another missionary colleague who was able to get their paperwork done in 15 days and 10 days. So other missionaries are getting them done despite this pandemic. Normally, we would think it would take longer because in the past, it has taken up to about 6 to 8 weeks to do it. So this has been turning around faster than in a way that we thought it would. So once we get this certificate of eligibility, and that basically translates into a visa. And when we have that, it's only valid for 3 to 6 months for us to be able to enter the country. Now, traditionally, it was 3 months, but because of the pandemic, they are extending it to 6 months, but that can change at any time. So we have a very small window during which we need to purchase our plane tickets, move out of our rental home, get all of our legal paperwork completed, which is such as like living wills and power of attorneys. We need to be able to put all of the remaining stuff that we want to put in storage into Rich's parents' basement, which is up in Pennsylvania. So we need to make a move up there. And then to say good farewell to our friends and family. All of that while we're continuing to homeschool our 3 children. But it's kind of this delicate dance we're doing because we can't move forward in a way without being 100% supported. Right now we're at 80%, so we're very close. And we believe in faith that God will provide what we need at the time that we need to go. And given that all of those things come together, we're looking at, we'll be leaving in April after Easter.
Great, great. Well, we certainly will be continuing to pray for you guys and partner with you and excited for you. So thank you for the time that you've given to us. And, we continue to envision seeing you as much as we can during these pandemic times. But please keep us updated, and we're just so happy for what you're going to be doing and glad to be partnering with you guys.
Yes, we are so glad to have Christ Covenant as one of our sending churches. I mean, it's exciting.
Well, God bless both of you guys. Yeah, Susan.
I was going to say that if we are still around in Charlotte until our departure, so it'd be great if people are interested in learning more about what we are going to be doing in detail. You can get in contact with us if you know us directly, or you can reach out to Mike. Mike, that would be okay to reach out to you and the missions department, and then they can connect you to us.
Absolutely. That'd be great. Well, God bless both you guys and your family.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.